There's something quietly radical about Gavin de Becker's core idea that fear is not an enemy, not a weakness, not a flaw in our emotional circuitry. Instead, he argues, fear is a gift, one of the most intelligent and accurate tools in the human survival toolkit. And the way he presents this idea is not with lofty abstractions, but through real stories, stories that shake you and stir something that lives deep in your nervous system. As you read, you begin to realize that you've likely been trained to override that system, to distrust it, and to feel ashamed of it. That is where the damage begins. Say, from the very first pages, the book isn't trying to teach us something new. It's trying to reconnect us with something old, something we were born with and then taught to mute. The signal of intuition, that small, quiet voice, the whisper that says, don't get on that elevator, don't open that door. Something is off. It's the kind of voice we so often shut down because we don't want to seem rude, paranoid, dramatic, or worse, wrong. But what if being wrong is better than being hurt? What if seeming dramatic is what keeps you alive? One of the most powerful aspects of the book is how it reframes everyday politeness. De Becker explains how cultural conditioning, especially for women, teaches people to prioritize politeness over survival. Think about that. We're taught to say yes when we feel no, to keep talking when we want to run, to be pleasant instead of perceptive. In real terms, that means we're sometimes choosing the comfort of strangers over the safety of ourselves. And we don't just do this casually, we do it automatically. That's not a personality trait, that's programming. And what this book does, almost like a therapeutic intervention, is start to deprogram it. Take one of De Becker's early stories. A woman enters her apartment building and a man she doesn't know offers to help her carry her groceries. Every signal in her body is screaming something is off, but she silences that voice. She doesn't want to be rude. She doesn't want to make assumptions. And that small decision to be agreeable nearly becomes fatal. Yeah, that scene haunted me, not because it's sensational, but because it felt familiar. How many times have I or someone I know felt a whisper of warning but stayed quiet? How often have I laughed off something that felt uncomfortable just to maintain peace or to appear chill? This book doesn't offer judgment, it offers clarity. It holds up a mirror and gently says, you've been trained to doubt yourself. But you don't have to live like that. The most radical idea here is that we already know. We already sense danger before it fully reveals itself. And this knowing isn't based on superstition, it's based on patterns. Subtle details, tiny contradictions in someone's behavior. The brain collects those clues faster than we can articulate them. Fear then isn't panic, it's data. And that's the twist. Real fear is not the same as worry. It's not endless rumination or mental loops. Real fear is fast, clear, and instructive. It moves. It tells you what to do. It doesn't sit with you and spiral. That's anxiety. That's speculation. Fear is specific and immediate, and if you listen to it, it may not have to stay long. De Becker shares that the people who survive violent encounters often say the same thing. I had a bad feeling. They all say it. The signal was there. They just needed to trust it. This isn't just a lesson about crime prevention. It's a lesson about tuning back into our own internal authority. The idea that someone else, someone with a badge or a degree or a uniform, knows more about your safety than you do is dismantled with care throughout the book. Yes, experts matter. Yes, statistics can help, but none of that replaces what your body knows in real time. If something feels off, it is. Maybe not in a way that can be measured or explained, but you don't owe an explanation to anyone. You owe yourself attention. Reading this book changed how I walk into rooms. It changed how I notice tone shifts in conversations. It changed how I interpret silence, body language, pacing, proximity, and more than anything, it changed what I believe about myself. Because to listen to fear is to admit that I matter, that my discomfort matters, that my instincts are not inconveniences, they're messages. And not listening to those messages isn't humility. It's self-abandonment. So much of life teaches us to override these signals in relationships, in friendships, in business. But this book suggests a different path. What would life look like if you honored those quiet warnings? What if fear wasn't the enemy, but the early messenger? For me, the biggest revelation was that real fear doesn't need to be solved. It needs to be respected. And once it's respected, once its message is heard, it usually subsides. That's what makes it a gift. It's not here to control you. It's here to alert you, to protect you, to let you act and then leave. The implications of that go far beyond the moments of danger. If you apply this way of listening to yourself in all areas of life, it rewires how you move through the world. You stop needing permission to leave conversations that don't feel right. You stop explaining your boundaries. You stop apologizing for wanting distance, space, quiet, or time. You stop ignoring that flash of unease when someone smiles with their mouth but not their eyes. And most importantly, you stop gaslighting yourself. That's what de Becker is really offering. The end of self-gaslighting, the beginning of internal trust, not because you're infallible, but because your mind and body have been observing life longer than you've been conscious of it. They've seen enough to know it. This book is not about living in fear. It's about releasing the chronic fear we live in when we ignore what's real. It's about distinguishing between noise and signal. And for the first time in a long time, it gave me permission to listen again, to see fear not as a weakness to overcome, but as an ally I had forgotten how to respect. See, some books educate you. This one recalibrates you. Once you begin absorbing its message, the world doesn't look the same anymore. You start rereading past moments in your life through a new lens, not to punish yourself for what you missed, but to understand what you always knew but never named. The man who stood too close to you in the elevator, the colleague who smiled while undermining you, the person who gave you flowers with clenched teeth. Your body knew something, it always did, but you were taught to second guess it. De Becker doesn't argue that every fear is correct. He says that every fear deserves investigation. What triggered it? What was out of place? What pattern shifted? And instead of asking, what's wrong with me for feeling this way, he invites us to ask, what is my body trying to tell me? The book repeatedly turns our attention inward, not to spiral into analysis, but to find grounding in what is already working. One of the most overlooked truths in the book is this: fear is not just a survival tool for extreme situations. It's also a compass in subtle moments. A new acquaintance who interrupts too often, a text message that makes your chest tighten, a joke that feels like a test, a silence that speaks louder than words. These are the moments that shape how we move through the world. And if we ignore them, we chip away at our own self-trust piece by piece. Eventually, we can't tell the difference between a genuine yes and a faked one. That erosion of internal clarity is one of the most dangerous losses we face, not because it kills us quickly, but because it convinces us that our own discomfort is irrelevant. And when you no longer believe your feelings matter, you start tolerating things you would have once walked away from. That's not survival. That's slow self-erasure. What the gift of fear teaches so powerfully is that restoring self-trust doesn't require huge moments of bravery. It begins in tiny choices, pausing before answering, not laughing at a joke that bothers you, letting a door close instead of holding it open for someone who gives you a bad feeling, saying no and not explaining it. These aren't dramatic gestures, but they are seismic acts of realignment. Every time you do them, you send a message to yourself. I believe you. I'm listening now. There's another layer to this book that becomes more profound the deeper you go. It's not just about individuals. It's about systems, about how society rewards charm, performance, and confidence, even when they're used as tools of manipulation. De Becker spends time unpacking how predators behave, and it's chilling not just because of what they do, but because of how often they are enabled by everyone around them. Uh, Manipulative people are often seen as charismatic, convincing, polite, charming. This isn't an accident, it's a strategy. And if we've been trained to prioritize politeness above instinct, we become easy targets. The predator is not the man in the shadows. He's the man who insists on carrying your groceries after you said no. He's the man who laughs too loudly at your discomfort. He's the one who tells you you're being rude when you set a boundary. The most dangerous people are not the ones who scare you right away. They are the ones who condition you to ignore that you're scared. That idea hit me hard because it doesn't just apply to strangers. It applies to coworkers, family members, even friends. Anyone can use charm as a mask. And once you understand that, you start to see manipulation not as something rare or cinematic, but as something ordinary and systematic. The moment someone tries to override your no, that's the moment to pay attention. Not because you have proof, but because your instincts don't need proof to be valid. I found myself revisiting past relationships with this lens, and it was painful. How many times had I explained away small violations? How many times had I said he didn't mean it that way, or I'm probably overthinking? This book isn't just about crime. It's about reclaiming every moment you gave away because you were taught that doubting yourself was a virtue. And then there's the fear of fear itself. We've been conditioned to see fear as a problem, something to push through, something to rationalize away. But in this book, fear becomes a signal flare. It lights up to say, pay attention. It doesn't demand panic. It demands presence. It doesn't always scream. Sometimes it whispers, and sometimes it shows up as a feeling you can't name. The way de Becker explains intuition is perhaps the most healing part of the book. He says intuition is always right in at least two ways. It is responding to something real, and it is giving you a message worth listening to. That doesn't mean you'll always act perfectly on it, but it does mean it's not random. It's a pattern recognition system honed by evolution, experience, and observation. We are often smarter than we know, but when we override that system, when we silence it with logic or shame, we start to live in cognitive dissonance. We feel one thing, say another, and do something else. That internal split is where suffering begins. It's not just about danger, it's about fragmentation. So many of us live in that fragmented state. We want to be nice and also safe. We want to be liked and also authentic. We want to be generous and also honest. And the fear that de Becker talks about, it often arises not because the world is terrifying, but because we're caught in the tension between what we feel and what we allow ourselves to express. This book offers a release valve. It says you can stop pretending. You can listen. You can trust what you feel without needing a courtroom's worth of evidence. You can leave the party early. You can say no without smiling. You can step away from a conversation that feels off. You can feel uneasy and honor that feeling even if you don't understand it yet. That shift doesn't just make you safer, it makes you whole. And then comes the question, what do we do with this awareness? Because awareness without action becomes just another burden. But the gift of fear doesn't just wake you up. It equips you. It teaches you the signs, the strategies manipulators use, the subtle tactics they employ, charm, typecasting, forced teaming, discounting no, the unsolicited promise, and loan sharking. Once you learn to spot them, it's like seeing the code behind the behavior. Suddenly, the gut feeling you couldn't explain has language. And once you have language, you have clarity. And with clarity, you get choice. That's the real gift. Not the fear itself, but the ability to recognize it, respect it, and respond to it in a way that protects your dignity, your space, your energy, and your life. When you sit with this book long enough, it stops being a guide to safety and starts becoming a philosophy of presence. It's a book about learning to inhabit your body again, to stop outsourcing your perceptions, to stop needing confirmation before honoring your discomfort. The deeper you go, the more you realize how often we seek permission to feel what we're already feeling, and that seeking is part of what puts us at risk, not just physically, but spiritually. Because each time we abandon our own inner voice in favor of external approval, we chip away at the foundation of self-respect. What de Becker calls intuition isn't some mystical gift. It's your history, your biology, your attention, your pain, your memory, your environment, your body, all collaborating in a second to tell you something is off. You may not be able to articulate the logic, but you can feel the verdict, and that verdict deserves to be heard. Even if you're wrong about the why, you're not wrong about the what, that something needs your attention. The book starts to subtly change your emotional priorities. You begin to value being in alignment more than being agreeable. You start feeling the cost of pretending, even in small ways. A fake laugh feels like a betrayal. An ignored instinct feels like a scar. And maybe for the first time in your life, you realize your fear isn't asking for proof. It's asking for protection. What's especially profound about de Becker's perspective is that he doesn't position fear as the opposite of power. He reveals that fear is power when honored. Real fear, not the overthinking spiral of anxiety, not the noise of social panic, but real, clean fear that shows up in the body with purpose. It makes you alert. It makes you move. It wakes up your deepest clarity. And once you understand that kind of fear, you never want to go back to dulling yourself again. There's a part of the book where he talks about how we've become too smart for our own instincts. We've built social rules so complex that we treat basic survival signals like social faux pas. You hear footsteps behind you at night, and instead of moving faster or crossing the street, you tell yourself not to be racist or paranoid or rude. But predators know this. They know you've been conditioned to doubt your fear, and they count on that. That's how they get close. One of the most chilling and important parts of the book is this. Violence is almost always preceded by warning signs. It doesn't just happen. It's not random. De Becker uses years of data to show that people who commit violence give signals before they act. The problem is not the absence of signals. The problem is the absence of listening. And more than that, the active suppression of listening, especially among those most at risk. When you read these sections, you start to realize how much of our modern civility is actually a mask for suppression. We're trained to override our fear in order to maintain social order. But the price of that order is often invisible pain. People staying in relationships they should leave, employees tolerating harassment, neighbors ignoring cries for help, women opening their doors to smiling strangers because they don't want to be mean. The heartbreak is that we've called this virtue. We've praised compliance as kindness. We've labeled self-betrayal as maturity. And we've done it for so long that some of us don't even know what it feels like to listen to ourselves anymore. But that can change. This book reminds you over and over that the return to self-trust doesn't require perfection. It requires practice. The goal is not to never feel afraid. The goal is to let fear be what it is meant to be. A signal, not a sentence. It doesn't need to own you. It needs to inform you, and you get to decide what to do next. That power, the power to respond to your own fear with clarity instead of shame, is one of the most liberating things you can experience. It extends far beyond physical safety. It changes how you handle rejection, how you process criticism, how you detect dishonesty in a relationship, how you know when someone is pretending to care, how you sense when something is off, even though the words sound right. This isn't just self-defense. it's emotional fluency. And when you start trusting your fear, you begin trusting your other feelings too. You start to realize that the unease you felt around that friend wasn't petty. The anxiety you felt at that job interview wasn't irrational. The knot in your stomach when you opened that message wasn't drama. It was data, your body collecting fragments of reality and handing them to you wrapped in emotion. What you do with that gift is up to you. But ignoring it doesn't make you noble. It makes you vulnerable. And pretending not to feel it doesn't make you strong. It makes you silent. For me, the most emotional part of reading this book was the realization that most of us don't need to learn how to be safe. We need to remember how to listen. That voice we silenced when we were young, the one that said, this feels wrong, this person isn't safe, this touch doesn't feel okay. That voice didn't disappear. It just got buried under layers of politeness, performance, survival, shame, people-pleasing, and self-doubt. This book helps you find it again. And the first time you hear that voice clearly, you'll remember that it always sounded like you. As you let the book settle in your body, not just your mind, you begin to feel the shift it brings. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's quiet and internal. A new kind of listening begins to take shape. It doesn't make you paranoid, it makes you precise. It doesn't turn you into someone afraid of the world, it turns you into someone who knows how to read it. The most incredible thing about this transformation is that it doesn't require external tools. It doesn't depend on pepper spray or self-defense classes or security systems, although all those things can help. It depends on something you already have, something you were born with, something that never left you, even if you stopped looking for it, your own inner alarm system. And what the book shows over and over again is that this system is not broken. It's not defective. It's just been drowned out by noise, the noise of social scripts, the noise of cultural expectations, the noise of being told that fear is for the weak, that hesitation is unattractive, that boundaries are rude, that anger is unladylike, that gut feelings are childish, that you need to lighten up, relax, smile, be cool. But when someone says, relax to you, and every cell in your body tightens, you're not broken, you're awake. There's a story de Becker tells about a woman who survived a brutal attack because she listened to her intuition. She had been raped, and the man told her he was leaving, but her instincts screamed that he wasn't. As soon as he stepped away, she got up and ran. She later learned that he had gone to the kitchen to get a knife. Her life was spared because she trusted the voice inside her that said, run now. That voice didn't explain itself. It didn't offer her logic chain. It didn't ask for permission. It told the truth in a language beyond words. And that's the thing about intuition. It's not always kind. It's not always comfortable, but it's almost always accurate. What you start to realize the more you sit with the stories in this book is that danger often hides inside familiarity. It mimics normalcy. It wears the costume of politeness, and what makes people unsafe isn't how scary they look, it's how well they hide. That's why real safety doesn't come from scanning the outside world for threats. It comes from staying in contact with your inner world. That's where the truth is. That's where the pulse lives. That's where your warning system is active, even when your brain tries to talk you out of it. And this applies far beyond situations of physical threat. I started noticing it in everyday interactions. When someone interrupted me too much, when someone insisted on helping me with something I didn't ask for, when someone told a story that didn't quite line up, instead of brushing it off or calling myself judgmental, I let the discomfort speak. I let myself believe that I noticed something real. And the more I did this, the more my life changed. Slowly, subtly, but irrevocably. I found myself leaving spaces sooner, answering texts later, or not at all, setting boundaries with people who drained me, canceling plans that didn't feel right. I stopped explaining so much. I stopped apologizing for things I didn't do. And something remarkable happened. I felt lighter, not because the world was suddenly safe, but because I no longer needed the world's permission to protect myself. De Becker doesn't promise that fear will make life easy. He doesn't even promise that it will always be right, but he does promise this, that if you listen to it, you will never again feel powerless, because fear, in its truest form, is not about shrinking. It's about knowing, and from knowing comes action. He also addresses something crucial, the difference between fear and worry. Worry is repetitive, obsessive, and rarely useful. Fear is immediate, situational, and purposeful. Worry is a pattern. Fear is a message. Worry is a hamster wheel. Fear is a signal flare. Worry keeps you in your head. Fear puts you in your body. Worry makes you small. Fear makes you alert. This distinction is life-changing because so many of us have been trapped in chronic worry, thinking that it makes us careful, that it makes us prepared. But in reality, worry exhausts us. It dulls our senses, it steals our time and energy. Real fear doesn't do that. Real fear arrives like a wave, asks you to move, and then subsides. It's clean, it's intelligent, and it's sacred. That word, sacred, might not appear in the book, but that's how it feels when you really understand what he's saying. Your fear is sacred. Your instincts are sacred. Your unease is sacred. Your number is sacred. Your ability to detect danger in silence, in tone, in timing, in energy, that's not a flaw. That's your birthright. And once you claim that birthright, you start seeing life differently. You stop needing people to agree with your choices. You stop offering disclaimers. You stop negotiating with what you already know. You walk away earlier. You say no sooner. You trust your body faster. You exit rooms where the air feels wrong, even if no one else seems to notice. You're no longer waiting for proof. You're no longer collecting red flags like souvenirs. You're no longer abandoning yourself in order to seem pleasant. You're no longer pretending not to know what you know. This isn't about living in fear. It's about finally living in truth. And that truth has a rhythm. Once you feel it, you don't want to go back. Once you hear that inner voice clearly, you don't want to silence it again. Once you move from self-doubt to self-respect, you realize how much energy you wasted trying to convince people you were fine when you weren't. Fear, honored properly, becomes freedom. And perhaps that's the most powerful thing about this book. It doesn't teach you how to escape fear. It teaches you how to respect it enough to let it serve you, then release it, to let it come and go like breath, to treat it not as a curse, but as a companion, not as a flaw, but as a guide. By the time you reach the final chapters, the book stops reading like advice and starts sounding like permission. Permission to walk away. Permission to trust your gut. Permission to leave situations without feeling obligated to explain, permission to value your life more than you value someone else's opinion of you. That's not fear-mongering, that's healing. And what heals you the most isn't the theory, it's the knowing that you were never crazy, never overreacting, never too much. You were reading things other people couldn't see because your body knew before your mind caught up. Every time you got a bad feeling about someone, but were talked out of it by them, by yourself, by the world, this book holds your hand and says, you were right to feel what you felt. That alone can undo years of self-doubt. The gift isn't fear itself, it's the clarity that fear brings when we finally stop treating it like an enemy. That clarity becomes the foundation of a new kind of life, a life where your yes is real, where your no is final, where your instincts are not negotiable, where you don't delay your exit just to seem nice, where you don't laugh when something feels wrong, where you stop writing your own discomfort off as a misunderstanding. And once you live that way long enough, something extraordinary happens. You become quiet inside. Not because life gets easier, but because the war between what you feel and what you say is finally over. You begin to feel whole. One of the most overlooked effects of this kind of self-trust is that it ripples outward. You become someone other people feel safe around, not because you never feel fear, but because you honor it and don't disguise it. You're no longer a performer. You're not chasing approval. You're present, grounded, able to hear what others are saying and what they're not saying. Your awareness becomes a gift to everyone you love. This is especially important in a world where violence is often minimized or ignored until it becomes too loud to deny. De Becker talks about how most people who commit acts of violence have long trails of behavioral warnings behind them, ignored, dismissed, or justified. This book is a plea to start listening earlier, not just to your own instincts, but to the quiet fear of others, to pay attention when a friend says they don't feel safe, to take it seriously when a child withdraws, to trust someone when they say something's wrong. It changes how you support others, not just how you protect yourself. You become the kind of person who doesn't need someone to explain why they're uncomfortable. You don't push them to give the benefit of the doubt. You don't talk them into staying. You believe them because now you believe yourself. And that is the great reversal. You came to this book thinking it would help you survive dangerous situations, but you leave realizing it can help you survive yourself. Your old patterns, your silencing, your over-explaining, your need to justify, your habit of making other people's comfort more important than your own. You survive that, and then you begin to thrive. There's a quiet kind of confidence that begins to grow when you live this way. It's not about being loud, confrontational, or invincible. It's about becoming unwilling to betray your own knowing. And that makes you harder to manipulate, harder to guilt trip, harder to exploit. You stop playing roles, you stop seeking permission, you stop chasing understanding from people who aren't even listening. And maybe most importantly, you start living a life that aligns with your nervous system, not against it. You move at your pace. You stop when you need to stop. You walk out when the air changes. You listen when something feels off. You speak less, observe more, act faster, rest sooner. You start living in the rhythm of your own safety. That rhythm is the opposite of paranoia. It's peace. You don't need to see danger in everyone. You just need to listen to the signal that says, not this person, not this time, not this place. And when you do, you don't owe the world a speech. You don't need a dramatic story. You don't need to prove you were right. You just need to leave. One step, one instinct, one choice at a time. And here's the final truth that sits between the lines of the gift of fear. You're allowed to protect yourself without explaining why. You're allowed to be rude if it keeps you safe. You're allowed to end a conversation mid-sentence. You're allowed to shut the door. You're allowed to walk out of the room. You're allowed to cancel. You're allowed to disappear. You're allowed to change your mind. You're allowed to feel fear and let it move you without shame, without apology, without doubt. You are allowed to survive. And when survival is no longer wrapped in guilt, it becomes something sacred, something quiet, something dignified. That is the gift Gavin de Becker gives, not just a book on violence prevention, but a path back to ourselves, a reminder that we are not powerless, that we are not clueless, that we were never broken, that our bodies have been trying to protect us all along. We just have to listen, and once you do, you'll never want to silence that voice again. Let this be the start of that return, the return to yourself, to your intuition, to your knowing. Let fear be what it was always meant to be, a whisper that saves your life, sometimes your physical life, sometimes your emotional one. But either way, it's always trying to save you. And that, in the end, is not something to run from. It's something to be deeply, deeply grateful for.